welcome to this week's live Q&A. I'm looking forward to answering 4 questions this week, which are about what to do when you have the urge to eat and you're not hungry, what to do when you're triggered by other people talking about their diets or weight loss, what to do if you're denied insurance because of your weight, and the last one is how to get more enjoyment from food. So, if you don't know me, I'm Vanya Fatidis from Peaceful Eating, where I help women around the world come to a place of ease and peace with food and their bodies so that they can live their lives unapologetically and do the things that really matter to them. All right, let me get to this week's questions. All right, here's the first one. When I get the urge to eat when I'm not hungry, I try to find out what is bothering me and making me want to eat, but often I can't find a reason why. Sometimes I can be feeling fine and suddenly out of nowhere I get the urge to call into Gregg's and devour a jam biscuit. Any suggestions as to how to handle these situations? So this is a really great question to ask, and thank you for asking it. The first thing I want to say is it's never wrong to eat when you're not hungry. One of the things that we're often told is that it is wrong to eat when you're not hungry, and that really comes from diet culture and from a weight centric paradigm. In other words, a paradigm in which we're trying to control weight. Food is used for many reasons, right? It's used to celebrate. It's used when we're grieving. It's used for many things that are not directly related to hunger. And this is one of the things that human beings do. Perhaps other animals don't do it or don't do it quite so much as we do. But but food is not only there to meet our need for hunger. It's mainly there to meet our energy needs, but that is not all it is. So I just want to put that out there that it's actually not wrong to eat when you're not hungry. Think about non-dieters. If you know anybody in your life, and there'll be the odd few people that you might know in your life who have never dieted, never had an issue with food, never worried about it. Would they be second guessing themselves? If they went past Greg's and saw a yummy jam biscuit in the window, might they just go, "Oh, that looks nice, I fancy it," and have it, and probably don't look back, don't have a whole kind of interrogation trying to figure out what's wrong that they might be wanting to eat when they're not hungry, right? So I think it's important to see that your questioning of why you might want to eat if you're not hungry is probably located in sort of diet mentality, thinking that there's something wrong if you do. Now, maybe you have in the past used food to cope with other things, and that might be so. I just need a sip of water. But usually, it is dieters who meet other needs with food. Usually, not always, but usually, if you come up from a background of having dieted, then this is probably a big contributor to that. Of course, food can also be used in this way for people who have never dieted but have experienced some kind of trauma, and eating food has been a way that they have learned to kind of dissociate from the pain they might be experiencing. So that is also a possibility. So what I want to say is um, there's nothing wrong with having a jammy biscuit if you fancy it. And part of unraveling from diet culture is really giving yourself unconditional permission to eat what you want when you want it, even if you're not hungry. And stay connected with yourself. So instead of perhaps, eating while you're walking down the high street and then you're not really paying attention, see if you can buy the biscuit and wait until a moment where you could sit on a bench or sit down somewhere or just, stop And then stay connected with yourself. Really enjoy the jammy biscuit. There's really nothing wrong with having it. And really, the more that we can give ourselves unconditional permission to eat what we want when we want without any guilt, the more this will really settle down for you. And of course, there's nothing wrong with checking in with yourself and asking yourself, well, what's going on here? Is there something going on that I need to pay attention to? But be aware of where your motivation is coming from. This inquiry has a motivation. What is your motivation for this inquiry? If your motivation is to try and control your weight because you're believing you shouldn't be eating a jammy biscuit, then that's probably not going to go well because it's a kind of restriction. But if your motivation is because you really want to take care of yourself and you want to meet your needs appropriately, and there's something going on here, like you're avoiding something, you're anxious about something, or angry about something, or something else, overwhelmed maybe, that's good to know, but not so that you can control your weight. It's good to know so that you can meet your needs better. Does that make sense? So, and the last thing I want to say is probably the reason that you have that urge when you pass Gregg's is because of either past restriction or even subtle restriction now. So maybe you do let yourself eat things, but are you emotionally giving yourself permission to have it? Is there some level of fear around eating these foods? Because if there is, there's going to be a subtle restriction going on, and that is going to make you crave the thing more. So I encourage you to keep giving yourself unconditional permission to eat what you want when you want it and do the best you can to stay with yourself. All right, I hope that helps. Let me move on to the next question. What do I do when I'm triggered when someone talks diets and losing weight? They're often happy about the latest fad that they're on and the fact that they have lost a bit of weight. I don't want to be lecturing them. So I totally agree that lecturing people is not really good unless you happen to be a professor at a university or you're being paid to give a lecture or whatever, then by all means lecture people. But lecturing people in the sense that you are saying it, I think, is meaning you don't want to be coming across as judging people for their choices and telling them that they should be doing something differently. And I totally agree. Everybody should be really in charge of their own choices when it comes to their own bodies. And yeah, they're in charge of them, you're in charge of you. So, what do you do when you're in a situation and somebody starts talking about their latest diet or how much weight they've lost and how much better they're feeling and blah, 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 etc., etc. So, what you've said here is that it's triggering, and that is really important for you to know that it is triggering for you. So, the first thing to do when something's triggering is to have compassion for yourself. So, to perhaps put your hand on your heart or put your hand on your arm or some kind of gentle touch and just think about compassion. Think about being kind to yourself and say to yourself something like, this is hard and I'm sorry that I'm struggling with this. Just say something like that to yourself so that you can be on your own side and um, soften, towards yourself. And perhaps even you might have, if it feels okay to you, have some compassion for the other person because this other person is almost certainly wrapped up in diet culture and is suffering too. And most likely, there's a very high likelihood that this person is going to come short with the new diet and is going to regain the weight and possibly even more on top of it and is going to probably not be feeling so great about it then. So compassion for yourself if it feels okay to you, compassion for the other person because it's coming from a place of suffering is what I suggest. Excuse me, I don't know what's going on with my throat today. Bit of lip salve. So the other thing I want to say is there's no need to respond. There's definitely no need to feed that person's narrative, right? You don't need to be curious about it. You don't need to ask questions about it. You don't need to feed it so that it keeps going, right? You can say, oh, and if you're feeling, and depending on the relationship, I mean, you could say, I'm happy that's working for you, and then change the subject. So you can have some direction in what is talked about next. And you could perhaps in advance think of something you might want to say, a direction you would like the conversation to go that is not in that direction of their weight loss. Um, and again, it depends on the relationship, but there is an in between. You don't have to be silent and you don't have to lecture. Those are two extremes, of the spectrum. There's something in between, which is sharing what is so for you. You could say, I'm happy that's working for you. I've really realized that doing anything like that is really bad for my mental health, and it turns out probably bad for my physical health too. And I'm feeling so much better, really legalizing all foods and really trying to listen to my body and, meet my needs as best as I can. There's something in between, but again, it depends on how triggered you are, what sort of agency you feel you have, and it depends on the relationship and how vulnerable you are willing to be. And there are no rules about it, and there's no should about how to have these sorts of conversations. All right, let me see. What is the next question? How do we deal with external judgments on our weight that affect our everyday lives, like life insurance when buying a house? I've just got a hold of intuitive eating and actually feeling healthier due to it. And now, after being rejected for critical illness cover, I feel like I should be crash dieting to get it down, just where I've been trying to get away from. I totally get it. And I'm so, so sorry that this is what has happened to you and you have been treated like a number, basically, a number on the BMI scale. And it's wrong, it's unjust, and it's discriminatory. So, where do you go from here? Well, again, the first thing is to have compassion for yourself because it is hard, you know. And so give yourself some compassion and really try not to blame yourself or your body because it's not your fault and it's certainly not your body's fault that this is the way things are. So the next thing to consider is, you considering a crash diet. Well, I mean, how likely is it to go well for you? I mean, are you likely to be able to sustain the crash diet for long enough to lose enough weight to, meet that criteria you know, and then what's going to happen? Because you're only here watching this and in my group asking these questions because you have experienced that dieting really doesn't work and that it causes all sorts of problems for us mentally and physically. So, of course, the choice is yours. You're always in charge of your own choices and body as much as possible. Um, but do consider that not only is it likely not to go well, it's likely to backfire. And what might the costs be for you in terms of the progress you've made with intuitive eating and feeling so much better with it? So think about the mental and physical costs potentially to yo-yoing, regaining the weight, becoming obsessed again, all of that. So it's obviously up to you. But there are potentially other options, and I could think of two, and there probably are more. The one would be to look elsewhere because there have got to be other insurance companies that don't require your weight in order to get you covered. Um, I don't know if you work, if you are employed, but potentially through your employer, often if there's a sort of group thing, they don't ask for that kind of information. But perhaps do some searches and ask around, you know, who who will insure. I don't know where you are or anything like that, but but you could do some research and explore other options. So if you are in my group, you could ask in my group. You are in my group because you asked the question in my group. So you could ask a question in the group. You could also ask in any other groups that you might be a part of. That because there are lots of us doing this kind of work, and so perhaps there are other people who might have that kind of information. So that's one idea, but also Google search, or what you could do? You could look on Lindo Bacon's website. She has got I'll see if I can find it and link it. Um, but there is a register, and I'm not sure if insurance companies are on the register. It'd be a great thing to add, though. Anyway, I'll check, and if it's there, I will add it in the comments below. And if not, then yeah, really do some research. And the other thing I was going to suggest is that you challenge that requirement. And this is hard to do, and you're up against whole kind of systems, and you're kind of it's hard. It's like David and Goliath kind of situation. um, but if you do want to go that route and you do want to challenge it, then if you'd like to contact me personally, do so, and I will send you what I have in terms of helpful articles, studies, or whatever that could help you to build your case with the insurance company. All right, hope that's helpful. All right, last question. So, here this person is saying, what are some ways I can start to amplify the joy and pleasure of eating? I think about the usual ones, choosing the foods I really want to eat in the way I want them prepared, rather than settling for something else, if it's possible, of course. Drawing some attention to the act of eating so that I'm taking the time to check in with how it tastes, feels, smells, sounds, looks, making sure I'm comfortable while eating, like sitting somewhere soft, sitting somewhere that doesn't hurt my back or affect circulation, etc. Setting a mood with maybe some candles, a clean table, etc. I've also been joining some groups for fat foodies, and I love them. Also, someone with fibromyalgia, I have learned over the last few months the incredible value of doing food prep sitting down and giving myself longer time to prep so I can still enjoy the foods I love without hurting myself to make them. I'm just loving this. But I'm wondering if you have any suggestions around this that maybe I'm not considering. I feel like now that food is just food and I can enjoy it without the stress of relying on it as my only source of emotional and social support, I want to play with ways of seeking joy and pleasure from my food related experiences. I really love that because, I could really just imagine you, although I don't know you, but I could just sort of imagine you taking this pleasure and really exploring this new relationship with food as one of pleasure and joy. And it just really lifted my heart. So thank you so much for that. And I did think of a few things, just a few. The one is presentation. So perhaps with the food itself, you could have some fun with presentation. I remember with one client I was working with years ago who was who really struggled a lot with food, and I suggested she become playful with it and even sort of make patterns out of the food on the plate. I mean, obviously if it's a hot meal it will be a bit more difficult, but to really to make faces, to make it fun, really to play with it. And so that's one thought I had. Another is to really experiment with new flavors and new recipes, things that you might not have tried before because you wouldn't let yourself, you wouldn't give yourself permission to maybe cook with butter or cook with cream or, something like that, or with new herbs and spices that you haven't tried. That might really enliven things for you and bring more pleasure and joy. And the last thing I thought about is um, really to consider the whole path, the journey that this food has been on to get from wherever it originated onto your plate or into your mouth. So if it's, say, you know, a food with several ingredients, then that's going to be several things you're going to be thinking about, literally from in the soil. Where did it come from? Who are the people? Uh, what sort of climate might it have uh, been in, just to bring it to mind, because that can really just bring a whole different quality to our appreciation for the food, and really increase our sense of gratitude. Although gratitude wasn't what you mentioned, but to me, gratitude and joy are very closely aligned. So I hope that that's helpful. And thank you so much, everybody, for asking the questions that you've asked. I really appreciate it. Just going to check. I still haven't figured out how to check if anybody's asking questions. Nope, doesn't look like it, although I don't know because I don't seem to actually see. Later on, I often see comments and I go, oh my gosh, I didn't see that at the time. So I just don't know. But anyway, here we are. And thank you so much for being here, for sending in your questions. And thank you so much for wanting to heal your relationship with food and your own body. It is a very precious thing to navigate and to do. So thank you for being here. If you are interested in more, learning more, then please do go to my website, peacefuleating.co.uk. If you /subscribe, you will get instant access to my guide to peaceful eating, which is not very long, but it really does give you a good understanding of what I'm about, and my approach to helping people resolve their issues with their bodies and food. And you can also go to my blog, where I have got hundreds of blogs. There's a search bar and you can search keywords and you can just check it out. I've got loads of helpful stuff on there. So I hope you have a great week. Do send me your questions. While you're on my website, you can go to the Q&A link and you can submit an anonymous question, or you can submit your question via social media. I would love to answer them next week. All right, take care and have a good week. Bye for now.